Alright, welcome everyone. In this Duet Night Abyss tier list, we're breaking down the best characters in a way that actually matters for real gameplay. Instead of just looking at raw damage numbers, we're judging each character based on two key roles. First up is how strong they are as your main character, meaning how smoothly they handle farming and how reliable they are when it comes to melting bosses. If a character feels good to play moment to moment and can carry fights on their own, that's a huge plus here. The second role focuses on characters you slot in as AI companions. These aren't just backups. We're looking at how much value they bring through off DPS, healing, buffs and debuffs while you're in control of your main. Some characters really shine here even if they're not meant to be on the field all the time. So in this video, I'll walk you through exactly why each Duet Night Abyss character lands where they do in both roles so you can build a team that actually fits your playstyle and clears content faster. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video and I'm ranking characters in Duet Night Abyss. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching.
My friends, only 0.1% of viewers subscribe. If you like this type of content, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you in advance for your support.
The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Margie, Outsider, and Daphne. This is the part of the list where everything almost works but never quite clicks the way you want it to. And that is exactly why C tier exists. These characters are not useless, they are just stuck in that awkward zone where they shine in very specific situations and then completely fall off when the game asks for real damage or late game pressure. Let's break them down one by one and be honest about where they stand in Duet Night Abyss. Let's start with Margie, because on paper her idea actually sounds pretty fun. Her whole gimmick revolves around stacking jackpot by picking up nearby items, then detonating everything with her ultimate to deal area damage that scales based on how much jackpot you manage to build. In early stages or while farming, this feels satisfying, especially when the screen explodes and enemies vanish. The problem is that this playstyle does not scale well at all, and once you hit late game modes or bosses, the damage just stops keeping up. Margie ends up feeling like a character designed for comfort farming rather than progression. You are spending time stacking jackpot instead of dealing consistent damage, and bosses simply do not care how clever the setup is if the numbers are not there. She is not terrible, she is just outclassed, and when the game gets serious, her ultimate becomes more flashy than effective. Fun concept, decent early value, but not someone you want to rely on when things actually get dangerous. Next up is Outsider, and honestly, this one hurts a little because his kit almost works. Outsider lives and dies by his ultimate, which puts him into a state of increased attack speed and tankiness through shields, but completely removes your ability to heal during its duration. On top of that, he has Stealthy Prowl, which is an excellent defensive tool that lets you escape danger when your health drops too low. From a safety perspective, Outsider is one of the most forgiving characters in this tier. The issue is damage, plain and simple. Even with the Malice boost from his ultimate, the damage ceiling is just not there. It feels like a missed opportunity, because the ultimate could have been much more interesting if it traded health for more damage, more attack speed, or better kiting potential. Even allowing stealth to continue without interrupting the ultimate and granting critical damage would have made him far more engaging. Instead, the playstyle feels disjointed, safe, and a bit dull, with very limited potential for high-tier damage output. Finally, we have Daphne, who is probably the least offensive member of C tier. Her damage per second is actually not bad, and her kit does work, but it feels like it is screaming to be used as a support or companion rather than a main damage dealer. Her ACOTH projectiles increase trigger probability, which allows her to contribute meaningful damage indirectly, especially in builds that rely on procs and effects rather than raw numbers. That is exactly why Daphne ends up here. She is not weak, she is just miscast. As a companion, she feels efficient, helpful, and reliable, but as your main character, she never fully takes control of the fight. You can make her work, but the game constantly reminds you that someone else could be doing this job better. Solid utility, respectable output, but ultimately more comfortable sitting beside you rather than leading the charge. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Hellfire, Tabetha, Randy, Rhythm, Truffle, and Filbert, and Rebecca. Now we are stepping into that sweet spot where characters start to feel consistently useful without completely breaking the game. And that is exactly what B tier represents. These are heroes that absolutely pull their weight, sometimes even flirting with higher tiers, but they usually come with a catch that keeps them just a step below greatness. If you enjoy flexible playstyles and smart positioning, this tier has a lot to offer. Starting with Hellfire, she is basically a walking fortress. Her kit is heavily focused on soaking damage, protecting the team, and controlling enemies, which makes her feel incredibly safe to play. Taunting enemies as a main character, while your companions deal most of the damage, can actually be fun, especially during progression. That said, she really shines more as a companion than a main damage dealer. For progression content, Hellfire honestly feels closer to A or even S tier, because her skill and ultimate have massive area damage that clears enemy groups with ease. The problem shows up during boss fights, where her damage per second just does not keep up. Against single targets, she becomes more of a distraction than a threat, which is why she works best as a support who enables others to shine rather than trying to carry the fight herself. Moving on to Tabetha, she is almost the complete opposite of crowd-focused characters like Rebecca. Tabetha is all about critical hits and using her ultimate to spawn multiple tentacles, then repeatedly activating her skill to command those tentacles to attack while also buffing allies. When everything lines up, her damage against bosses is genuinely impressive. What makes Tabetha special is how focused her kit is. All tentacles locking onto a single boss turns her into a very reliable main hero for boss killing. At the same time, her skill damage buff makes her surprisingly effective as a support. She may struggle a bit during farming since she is not amazing at clearing large groups, but against bosses, she knows exactly what her job is and does it well. Then we have Randy, who is first and foremost a shield-based support and only secondarily a damage dealer. His damage output does not compete with A or S tier characters, but that does not mean he is weak. He provides solid area damage for clearing enemies and performs well against bosses simply because he can tank hits comfortably. That said, Randy feels more efficient as a companion than a main character. As a main, you can survive almost anything, but the fight often takes longer than it should. As a companion, his shields and steady damage add real value without slowing down your overall damage potential. Rhythm sits right in the middle of B tier, and honestly, that feels appropriate. She does a bit of everything, but never fully commits to damage or support. Her skill gives excellent mobility, making her very fun to play, and her ultimate can pull and push enemies around the battlefield. The problem is that her ultimate does not accomplish much on its own. It becomes valuable only when paired with companions that deal heavy area damage, allowing you to group enemies for efficient clears. Her damage per second is still respectable, especially if you stack her charges properly, which also build naturally through sanity usage thanks to her passive. She is solid, just not exceptional. Next up are Truffle and Filbert, a duo that leans more towards support but still manages to deal respectable damage. Unlike Daphne, they do not completely give up offensive potential. Their skill and ultimate provide strong area damage that works well both during progression and in boss fights, and the added mobility is a nice bonus. However, their ultimate comes with a frustrating drawback. Being unable to use your weapon during it slightly hurts your overall damage output and can feel awkward in longer fights. Even so, they remain versatile and reliable, making them a strong B tier pick rather than a niche one. Finally, we arrive at Rebecca, a character I might have been a little too harsh on at first. Rebecca specializes in damage over time, stacking poison through her attacks and summons created by her skill. Her ultimate detonates those stacks for massive area damage and spreads poison on kills through her passive, creating an extremely satisfying loop during farming. This makes her incredible for progression and crowd clearing, where enemies chain react and melt. Against bosses, she loses some effectiveness since poison stacks cannot spread as easily, but with good kiting and consistent damage over time, she still performs respectably. With the additional summons Intron, she easily jumps into A or even S tier territory, though to be fair, many characters do the same. I will likely revisit her ranking after more testing because she might be better than I initially gave her credit for. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Yale and Oliver, Lady Nightfall, Sibyl, and Berenice. This is where the list starts feeling dangerous, because A tier is full of characters that can absolutely take over a run if you actually know what you are doing. These are not just good enough picks anymore, they are powerful, expressive, and reward player control in a big way. If you like having agency and turning good kits into great performances, this tier is your playground. Starting with Yale and Oliver, this duo is all about preparation and payoff. You can stack an absurd number of bombs and mines to create massive pyro damage that deletes both enemy groups and bosses. When everything is placed correctly, the damage ramps up into a beautiful chain reaction that feels like a perfectly timed crescendo of explosions. The catch is that Yale and Oliver demand a human hand. You need to manually place, arrange, and time everything because the artificial intelligence simply does not set up explosions optimally. As a main character, they shine because you control the battlefield. As a companion, a lot of that potential is wasted. High effort, high reward, and absolutely deserving of A tier. Lady Knifel plays a very different game. Her entire kit revolves around applying attack debuffs through solar effects and slowing enemies with lunar effects, allowing her to kite safely while dealing respectable damage. This makes her extremely strong in boss encounters, where controlling enemy behavior matters more than raw numbers. For progression and farming, she is only okay because focusing on debuffs as a main character means sacrificing some damage per second that could otherwise speed up grinding. However, her ultimate changes the equation by letting her freely spam solar and lunar while boosting skill damage through overcapping skill range. The damage trade-off is not nearly as bad as it sounds, which keeps her firmly in A tier as a main character. Then we have Sibyl, who lives in a strange but interesting space. Her skill targets random enemies, and her ultimate requires heavy investment into bonus effect to generate enough might and thunder stacks for meaningful area damage. When everything lines up, her damage can look incredible. The problem is consistency. In late game content, it becomes increasingly difficult to make sure her skill hits the right targets and that bonus effect stacks correctly to generate Might of Thunder. The solution is smart usage. Save the empowered, fully stacked ultimate for groups to link enemies and deal area damage, and reserve the empowered skill for isolated bosses where it can deliver massive single target damage. Play her incorrectly and she feels frustrating. Play her correctly and she feels brilliant. Finally, there is Berenica, a character who used to be outright terrifying back in the gacha days before star ratings were removed. Even after multiple nerfs, she remains a very viable main damage carry. Her core damage loop is all about firing as many sword waves as possible during her ultimate before sanity drains away, resulting in explosive damage output. To maximize her potential, you want to boost trigger probability so her passive activates frequently, restoring sanity and extending her ultimate. The Afterburn passive upgrade is especially strong, allowing her to ignore Fairlight sanity consumption, and even the first Intron upgrade significantly improves her ultimate uptime. She may not dominate like she once did, but Berenica still earns her place in A tier through sheer consistency and raw damage potential. The characters in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Psyche, Lyn, and Fantasio. This is the part of the tier list where the game stops forgiving mistakes and starts rewarding mastery. S tier characters are not just strong, they let you bend the rules of Duet Night Abyss if you understand their mechanics and are willing to play on the edge. When piloted well, these characters do not merely clear content, they erase it. Psyche is easily one of the best characters in the entire game for raw progression speed and boss damage. Her defining strength is the ability to use health instead of sanity during her ultimate, which sounds terrifying until you realize how safe her kit actually is. She can fly, making kiting significantly easier, and once you learn how to stay airborne while repositioning, enemies rarely get the chance to punish you. On top of that, Psyche becomes even safer with her first and fourth Intron upgrades, which add sustain and defensive layers that offset the health cost. Her skill applies an innate slow to enemies, further simplifying kiting and making boss fights feel almost unfair. Add in the fact that her passive scales extremely well with critical hits by granting buffs whenever she lands a critical strike, and you end up with a character that rewards aggressive, high crit builds with absurd damage. Lyn sits in a similar power bracket but demands a different kind of discipline. Her damage ceiling is insanely high, but most of it comes from her ultimate, which completely locks her in place. This means positioning is everything. Before activating the ultimate, you must make sure there are no enemies behind you and ideally find high ground or a safe angle where you can channel freely. When done correctly, her ultimate drastically boosts attack speed until sanity runs out, resulting in some of the highest sustained damage in the game. Her skill applies laceration, which can deal significant damage over time, especially if you focus on ranged weapon damage with your companions to stack it efficiently. High risk, high reward, and absolutely devastating in the right hands. Finally, we have Fantasio, a character that feels almost like a rhythm game disguised as a damage dealer. He excels in both progression and the boss fights, but only if you properly trigger Fermata to detonate Adagio stacks for massive damage bonuses. Understanding his rotation is key to unlocking his true power. The optimal flow is stacking Adagio up to 10 using Recitativo, then activating the ultimate to enter Bestial Fury. From there, you perform a 4-hit Furious Claw combo, jump, and finish with a plunging attack to trigger Fermata. This sequence grants a massive damage buff, refills sanity, and applies immersion, allowing you to repeat the cycle until resources run out. The 3-hit beam combo during the ultimate can be useful when range is needed, but maximizing damage almost always means committing to the 4-hit plus plunge Fermata loop. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.